through the back, sweetie. This isn't Make-A-Wish.
The words hit like a slap across Premium Sky Flight 847's first-class cabin. Flight attendant Rebecca Walsh didn't whisper it. She announced it, loud enough for every passenger to hear her dismiss the 18-year-old black girl standing in the aisle. What Rebecca didn't know was that in exactly 12 minutes, an $85 million private jet would block the runway. And the girl she just humiliated owned the very ground the plane was sitting on. The girl's name was Zara Brooks. She stood there in her worn Harvard medical sweatshirt and faded jeans, clutching a weathered leather backpack filled with medical textbooks. Her beat-up Converse sneakers had walked the halls of Detroit's free clinic for the past month, where she'd worked 72-hour shifts under the fake name Zara Johnson. Her father insisted she travel anonymously. "You need to see how the world treats people who look like you when they don't know who you are," Marcus Brooks had told her. He was right. The world was about to show her exactly what it thought of a tired black teenager in economy clothes, sitting in a first-class seat. Rebecca Walsh, 42, divorced and bitter about how life had turned out, saw Zara as an easy target. In her 18 years as a flight attendant, Rebecca had learned to spot the difference between old money and new money from 50 feet away. Looking at Zara, she didn't see any money at all. She saw a mistake. A glitch in her perfect ecosystem of exclusivity. Boarding passes are checked at the door. Rebecca continued, her voice sugary but with a hard metallic edge. She stepped into the aisle, blocking Zara's path just as the girl reached for the overhead bin. "But I think you might be confused. Economy boarding is through the second bridge back that way." She pointed a manicured finger toward the rear of the plane, not even looking Zara in the eye. The Boeing 787's first-class cabin smelled of exclusivity. 12 lie-flat suites lined the front section, each one a private sanctuary of leather and mahogany. This wasn't just transportation. It was status. And at 11:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, every seat was occupied by someone who believed they belonged there. In seat 2A sat Brad Morrison, 38, a white hedge fund manager with platinum elite status and an ego to match. Currently under SEC investigation for $50 million in embezzlement. Though he didn't know federal agents were building their case yet, Brad viewed first class as his personal domain. The moment he saw Rebecca confronting the black teenager, he perked up like a predator sensing blood. Stewardess Brad called out, snapping his newspaper shut. "Is there a problem here?" Zara paused, her hand hovering over the latch of the overhead bin. She looked exhausted. It had been a long week working at the free clinic, treating patients who called her Dr. Johnson and had no idea she was worth more than their entire neighborhood. She just wanted to sleep on the flight to Miami. "I'm not confused," Zara said softly, her voice hoarse from fatigue. "I'm in 1A. Rebecca let out a short, incredulous laugh disguised as a cough. She looked around the cabin at the other passengers. In seat 3B, Elena Rodriguez, a Hispanic nurse from Chicago, was pretending to read her magazine, but watching the interaction carefully. She'd faced discrimination herself and recognized the signs. Miss Rebecca said, stepping closer and invading Zara's personal space. "This is first class. These suites cost $8,000 one way. Now I don't know how you slipped past the gate agents, but we are on a tight schedule. I need you to move to your assigned seat immediately." The cabin fell silent except for the soft hum of the engines. Other passengers shifted uncomfortably. James Park, an Asian businessman in seat 4A, looked up from his laptop. An elderly white couple in seats 5A and 5B exchanged worried glances. A young white mother in seat 3A instinctively pulled her child closer. Zara didn't budge. She reached into her hoodie pocket, pulled out a crumpled boarding pass, and held it up. The heavy cardstock gleamed with Premium Sky's gold foil strip that indicated full fare first class. "Zara Brooks, seat 1A. She read clearly. "It's right here." Rebecca snatched the pass from her hand like it was contaminated. She stared at it, her mind already made up. Her bias was a concrete wall that no amount of evidence could break through. A girl looking like that, black young dressed down, didn't buy full-fare international first-class tickets. Computers make mistakes, Rebecca sneered, handing the ticket back. Or perhaps you found this. Regardless, we have a situation. The only situation, Zara said, her patience wearing thin, is that you're blocking me from my seat. That's when Brad Morrison decided to join the party. The situation, his booming voice came from seat 2A, is that some of us pay for exclusivity, not a charity case. He stood up, all 6 feet of entitled arrogance, and looked Zara up and down like she was something stuck to his shoe. Stewardess, is this child going to be here the whole flight? I have a merger to review. I can't concentrate with urban noise. Rebecca's spine straightened. This was her cue. She had to protect the real customers, the paying customers, the customers who looked like they belonged. Don't worry, Mr. Morrison, Rebecca said, flashing him a professional smile that never reached her eyes. She turned back to Zara, her face dropping into a scowl. Come with me. We're going to sort this out in the galley. I paid for this seat, Zara said firmly. I'm sitting in it. She tossed her backpack into the overhead bin and sat down in 1A. The leather crunched softly under her weight. She buckled the seatbelt, the metallic click echoing in the silent cabin like a gunshot. Rebecca's face turned crimson, clashing with her premium sky scarf. She marched to the galley phone, but then had a better idea. She walked back to Zara, leaning over the suite wall. Listen to me, Rebecca, hissed her voice low so the others wouldn't hear the full venom. I know what you're doing. You used miles, right? Or maybe an employee pass from someone who works here. Here's the reality check. We are overbooked. I have the authority to reassign seats for the comfort and safety of the cabin. Elena Rodriguez in 3B pulled out her phone and started recording discreetly. Something about this felt very wrong, and her nursing background had taught her to document everything. That's not my problem, Zara said, putting her noise-canceling headphones over her ears. Rebecca reached out and physically pulled the headphones off Zara's head. Zara flinched, shock registering in her eyes. Don't touch me, Zara said quietly, but her voice carried a dangerous edge. I need your attention, Rebecca snapped. We have a VIP on standby. I am downgrading you to economy. There's a middle seat in row 34. You'll take it. I didn't use miles, Zara said, her voice trembling slightly with controlled anger. And I don't want a downgrade. I want to go to Miami. Brad Morrison had heard enough. You're disrupting this flight. Get this little troublemaker off the plane. Call security. Elena Rodriguez stopped pretending to read her magazine. She hit record on her phone and started a live stream to her Instagram. This is Elena Rodriguez on Premium Sky Flight 847, she whispered to her camera. And I'm watching discrimination happen in real time. James Park opened his laptop and started typing notes. As a corporate lawyer, he recognized a discrimination lawsuit when he saw one developing. Rebecca crossed her arms and delivered her ultimatum. I'm giving you 5 seconds. Move to economy, or I'll call airport police and have you removed for failing to comply with crew instructions. That's a federal offense, sweetie. You want a criminal record before you're 20. Zara looked around the cabin. Most passengers were looking down at their phones, uncomfortable but unwilling to get involved. Only Elena was openly supportive, giving her an encouraging nod. You're making a mistake, Zara said, her voice dropping to a dangerous calm. A very big, very expensive mistake. The only mistake, Rebecca retorted, was letting you on board. She flagged down Maria Santos, a young Hispanic flight attendant. Maria, grab her bag from the bin. Take her to row 34. Ma'am, Maria said hesitantly. Maybe we should. Now, Rebecca cut her off. As Maria reluctantly reached for Zara's backpack, Zara stood up. No one touches my belongings. Rebecca stepped forward and placed her hand on Zara's shoulder, pushing her back toward the seat. It was slight, but it was assault. And Elena Rodriguez caught it all on video. "You just put your hands on a passenger," Zara whispered. "I'm securing the cabin," Rebecca lied smoothly. "Now move." Zara took a deep breath. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. It wasn't just any iPhone. The back casing was made of matte black titanium, a prototype not even on the market yet. "I'm making a call," Zara announced. "Phones off, doors are about to close," Rebecca shouted. "You haven't closed the doors yet," Zara noted, glancing at the still open boarding door. "So I'm making a call." She dialed a single number. "Speed dial number 1. It rang once. Daddy, Zara said into the phone. Rebecca rolled her eyes so hard it looked painful. "Oh, great, she's calling Daddy. What's he going to do?" "File a complaint." What Rebecca didn't know was that 200 miles away in Washington, D.C., in a classified briefing room at the Pentagon, Marcus Brooks, owner and chairman of Brooks Aerospace Industries, worth $4. $2 billion, had just excused himself from a meeting with the Secretary of Defense to take his daughter's call. The countdown had begun. "Zara." "What's wrong?" Marcus Brooks's voice went from casual to sharp in 2 words. In the Pentagon's secure briefing room, 3-star generals and defense contractors paused their discussion of a $12 billion military contract as the most powerful man in aerospace suddenly focused entirely on his phone. "I'm on Premium Sky Flight 847, Zara said quietly. "The flight attendant won't let me sit in my seat." "What do you mean won't let you?" she says. "People like me don't belong in first class. She's trying to move me to economy." Marcus's jaw tightened. "People like you." "You know what she means, Dad." In the briefing room, Marcus held up one finger to the Secretary of Defense. "Excuse me for one moment. Family emergency." He stepped into the hallway, his voice dropping to that dangerous calm that his business rivals knew meant someone was about to have a very bad day. "What's the flight number again?" "Premium Sky 847. Detroit to Miami. Are you hurt? Did anyone touch you?" She grabbed my headphones off my head, put her hands on my shoulder. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were cold as winter steel. "Stay on the line. Don't hang up." "And Zara. Yeah. You handle this with the grace I taught you. Let them show the world who they really are." Marcus Brooks hadn't started life with $4.2 billion. His father had been a mechanic who built engines in a small shop in Detroit. Marcus had turned that shop into Brooks Aerospace Industries, the second largest private military contractor in the United States. He owned 3 airports, manufactured aircraft for 6 countries, and had a fleet of private jets that rivaled some small nations. But none of that mattered as much as the conversation he was having with his daughter. He'd insisted Zara work anonymously at the free clinic for one reason. "You need to see how the world treats people who look like you when they don't know who you are." It was a lesson in humility and reality. Money could buy comfort, but it couldn't buy respect. That had to be earned. Now his 18-year-old daughter was learning that lesson in the most public way possible. Sarah, he called to his assistant, who was waiting nearby. "Get me everything on Premium Sky Flight 847. Flight manifest, crew records, passenger list. I want to know who's on that plane." Sarah Martinez, his chief of staff for the past 8 years, didn't ask questions. She'd seen Marcus in this mode before. Someone had made the mistake of threatening his family. David Marcus called to his lawyer, who was reviewing contracts in the next room. "Drop everything. We have a situation." David Kim, Harvard. Law graduate and the most expensive attorney money could buy, looked up from his documents. "What kind of situation?" "Discrimination. Federal level. My daughter." David's expression shifted instantly. "I'm on it." Back on the plane, Rebecca Walsh was enjoying her moment of power. She'd called Captain Williams to the first-class cabin, a 55-year-old white man who'd been flying for Premium Sky for 20 years. "Captain, this passenger is being disruptive and non-compliant," Rebecca reported, gesturing toward Zara, who was still calmly talking on her phone. "Ma'am," Captain Williams said to Zara, "you need to follow crew instructions." Zara covered her phone with her hand. "I am following them, Captain. I'm sitting in my assigned seat." Brad Morrison stood up again, his voice carrying across the cabin. "This is ridiculous. I didn't pay $8,000 to deal with this drama. Either remove her or I'm getting off this plane and filing a complaint with your corporate office." Helena Rodriguez's live stream was up to 5,000 viewers with comments flooding in. "This is disgusting. Someone help this girl. What airline is this?" Zara, Justice. She positioned her phone to capture the entire scene while whispering commentary. The flight attendant just physically grabbed a black teenager who has a valid first-class ticket. The captain is now involved. This is Premium Sky Flight 847. James Park had opened a legal document on his laptop and was taking detailed notes with timestamps. As a corporate attorney, he knew this was going to end up in court, and he wanted to make sure Justice had accurate records. The elderly couple in 5A and 5B, Robert and Margaret Thompson, both retired teachers, were visibly distressed. Margaret leaned over to her husband. "This is wrong, Bob. That poor girl hasn't done anything." "Should we say something?" Robert whispered back. "I don't know. I just don't know." The young mother in 3A, Jessica Walsh, no relation to Rebecca, was trying to shield her 6-year-old daughter from the ugliness unfolding around them. "Mommy, why is that lady being mean to the girl?" the child asked innocently. Jessica didn't know how to answer. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Marcus's team was moving with military precision. Sarah Martinez had pulled up Premium Sky's corporate structure executive team and current stock price. David Kim was researching federal discrimination law and FAA regulations. Tony Russell, Marcus's security chief and former Navy SEAL, was coordinating with contacts in aviation security. Boss Sarah called out, "I've got the flight manifest. Your daughter's in Seat 1A, Premium Suite, full fare paid. No miles, no upgrades. Cash transaction last week. Crew records. Rebecca Walsh, head flight attendant, 18 years with Premium Sky. I'm seeing some red flags in her file." Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. "What kind of red flags?" 47 passenger complaints over the past 5 years. All buried by middle management. Most involving demographic issues. 47, yes, sir? The airline knew they had a problem and chose to cover it up instead of addressing it. David Kim looked up from his legal research. "Marcus, this is a civil rights violation under federal aviation law. If we can prove a pattern of discrimination, we can shut them down." Marcus finished, or at least cost them hundreds of millions in settlements and regulatory fines. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Tony, get the Sterling Hawk ready for immediate departure to Miami. File a flight plan for emergency passenger pickup. The Sterling Hawk was Marcus's personal Gulfstream G700, the most advanced private jet in the world. It could fly from D.C. to Miami in 90 minutes. "Sarah, call Miami Airport Authority. Tell Director Johnson I need to speak with him immediately." What do I tell him? That Marcus Brooks has a family emergency and I need his full cooperation. Director Johnson would cooperate. Marcus's aerospace company had been instrumental in designing Miami's new terminal, and Brooks Industries held contracts worth $200 million with the airport authority. On the plane, Rebecca Walsh was escalating her assault on Zara's dignity. "I've been patient with you, Rebecca," announced loudly. "But my patience has run out. You have 30 seconds to get out of that seat and move to economy, or I'm having you arrested for interfering with flight operations." Zara looked up from her phone. "Dad, did you hear that?" Marcus's voice came through clearly enough for others to hear. "I heard it. Keep recording everything. And Zara, remember what I taught you about people who mistake kindness for weakness. Brad Morrison was getting more agitated by the minute. "This is unacceptable. She's holding up our departure with her phone call. Stewardess, take her phone." Sir Captain Williams said, "Please return to your seat." "I will not. I'm a Platinum Elite member. I've been flying with this airline for 15 years. I demand she be removed immediately." Elena Rodriguez was now up to 15,000 viewers on her live stream. The comments were coming in so fast she couldn't read them all. "Someone call the news. This girl needs a lawyer. Premium Sky is about to get sued. Her dad sounds important. Premium Sky discrimination." She switched to her Twitter account and posted live discrimination on @Premium Sky Flight 847. Black teen with valid first-class ticket being forced to economy by racist flight attendant. Video evidence. Share this. The tweet was retweeted 500 times in the first minute. James Park closed his laptop and made a decision. He stood up and addressed the cabin. "Excuse me, but I'm an attorney. I've been documenting this entire interaction, and what I'm witnessing is clear discrimination based on race. This young woman has committed no violation of any airline policy or federal regulation." Rebecca whirled around. "Sir, please stay out of this." "I'm not staying out of anything. You've created a hostile environment for a paying passenger based solely on her appearance and age. That's illegal." Brad Morrison pointed at James. "Great, now we have lawyers getting involved. This flight is turning into a circus." Maria Santos, the junior flight attendant, approached Rebecca quietly. "Rebecca, maybe we should just let her sit. She has a valid ticket." "Don't tell me how to do my job, Maria. I've been flying longer than you've been alive. But she hasn't done anything wrong. One more word and you'll be looking for a new job tomorrow." In Washington, Marcus was coordinating a response that would make Pearl Harbor look like a minor skirmish. "Tony, what's the status on the Sterling Hawk fueled and ready for departure in 10 minutes, sir? Flight plan filed for Miami International, priority approach requested. Sarah, get me Premium Sky's CEO on the phone, now." "Sir, he's in a board meeting." "I don't care if he's meeting with the Pope. Get him on the phone or I'll buy enough stock to fire him myself." Marcus Brooks owned 1.7% of Premium Sky's outstanding shares, not enough to control the company, but enough to cause serious problems if he decided to dump them all at once. More importantly, Brooks Aerospace had an annual contract with Premium Sky worth $400 million for aircraft maintenance and parts supply. "David, what's our legal exposure if I decide to destroy this airline?" "Legal exposure. Marcus, they're discriminating against your daughter on video. You could sue them into bankruptcy and the federal government would probably thank you for it." "Good, because that's exactly what I'm about to do." Back on the plane, the situation was reaching a breaking point. Rebecca had called airport security and was now demanding that Captain Williams make an official report about an unruly passenger. Captain Rebecca said formally, "Passenger in 1A is refusing to comply with crew instructions, interfering with flight operations, and creating a disturbance. I request she be removed from the aircraft." Captain Williams looked at Zara, who was sitting quietly in her assigned seat reading a medical textbook while staying on the phone with her father. "What exactly has she done wrong?" the captain asked. Rebecca faltered for a moment. She's in the wrong seat. According to who?" "According to me, I know when tickets don't match passengers." James Park stood up again. "Captain, I've been observing this entire interaction. This passenger has a valid boarding pass, has committed no violations, and has been consistently calm and respectful. The only disruption has come from your flight attendant's discriminatory behavior." The cabin erupted. Brad Morrison started shouting about lawyers and political correctness. Elena Rodriguez announced to her 25,000 live stream viewers that a lawyer was backing up the discriminated passenger. Other passengers were choosing sides, with most supporting Zara, but afraid to speak up against the authority figures. Through it all, Zara sat calmly, occasionally speaking quietly to her father, reading her medical textbook and maintaining the dignity that Marcus Brooks had spent 18 years teaching her. She had no idea that 200 miles away, her father had just declared war on a $15 billion airline, or that in exactly 47 minutes, the most expensive private jet in the world was going to park directly in front of Premium Sky Flight 847's gate and change everything. The countdown continued. Mr. Brooks' Premium Sky CEO Richard Hampton's voice cracked slightly as his assistant handed him the phone in the middle of his board meeting. "I wasn't expecting your call." Marcus Brooks stood in the Pentagon hallway, watching through the window as his Gulfstream G700 was being prepared for immediate departure. "Richard, we've never met personally, but I believe you know my company." "Of course, sir. Brooks Aerospace. We have an excellent working relationship," had Marcus corrected. Past tense. "We had a working relationship until about 10 minutes ago." There was silence on the other end of the line. In the Premium Sky boardroom, Richard Hampton held up his hand to pause the quarterly earnings presentation. His board members, 12 of the most powerful executives in aviation, sensed something was wrong. "Sir, I'm not sure I understand. My daughter is on your flight 847, Detroit to Miami. Your head flight attendant just discriminated against her, physically assaulted her, and is now attempting to have her arrested. All because she's a black teenager who doesn't look like your typical first-class passenger." Richard Hampton's face went white. His board members leaned forward, trying to hear the conversation. "Mr. Brooks, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding." "There's been no misunderstanding, Richard. There's video evidence, there are witnesses, and there's about to be a federal lawsuit that will make your discrimination settlement from 2019 look like pocket change." Hampton remembered the 2019 settlement. $47 million paid quietly to avoid federal prosecution. It had been buried in legal paperwork, but Marcus Brooks clearly knew about it. "Sir, if you could give me some details, I'll personally investigate." "You'll personally investigate." Marcus's voice dropped to Arctic levels. "Richard, you've had 47 complaints about this specific flight attendant over 5 years. Your company knew she was discriminating against passengers and chose to cover it up instead of addressing it. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern." Richard Hampton looked around the boardroom. His general counsel was frantically taking notes. His PR director was already pulling up social media feeds. His stock price was displayed on 3 monitors around the room. "How do you know about internal personnel matters?" Hampton asked. "Because I make it my business to know who I'm working with. And right now I'm wondering if Brooks Aerospace should continue doing business with a company that treats my daughter like a criminal for sitting in a seat she paid for." The threat hung in the air like a nuclear weapon. Brooks Aerospace's annual contract with Premium Sky was worth $400 million. It covered aircraft maintenance, parts supply, and technical support for Premium Sky's entire fleet of 847 planes. Losing that contract would devastate the airline's operating margins. "Mr. Brooks, I assure you we'll resolve this immediately. If you could just—" "Too late for that, Richard, but I'll tell you what's going to happen next. In about 40 minutes, my personal jet is going to land at Miami International and position itself where everyone can see it. The media is already being contacted. By tonight, your stock price will be in free fall, and tomorrow morning my legal team will be filing federal discrimination charges that will make your shareholders question why they ever trusted you with their money." Richard Hampton's hand was shaking. "Sir, surely we can work this out. We could have worked it out when you fired Rebecca Walsh after her first 10 complaints, or her 20th, or her 40th. But you chose to protect a racist flight attendant instead of your passengers. Now you get to explain that choice to the federal government." Marcus ended the call and immediately dialed his security chief. "Tony, what's the status? Sterling Hawk Airborne, sir. 42 minutes to Miami. I've coordinated with Airport Authority. We'll have priority positioning at Terminal 3 directly adjacent to Premium Sky's gate." Media contacts CNN, Fox News, and local Miami stations have been notified about a developing discrimination story. I may have mentioned that it involves a prominent business family and federal aviation violations. Excellent. Sarah. What's happening with social media? Sarah Martinez looked up from her tablet. It's exploding, sir. The hashtag #ZaraJustice is trending nationally. The nurse who's filming has 50,000 viewers on her live stream. Premium Sky's stock is down 8% in after-hours trading. David, legal status. I've already drafted preliminary federal complaints under the Civil Rights Act and FAA anti-discrimination regulations. We can file within an hour of landing. I've also prepared a civil lawsuit seeking $500 million in damages. Marcus smiled grimly. Make it $750 million and add punitive damages for the pattern of discrimination they've been covering up. On Flight 847, the situation had devolved into chaos. Rebecca Walsh had convinced Captain Williams to make an official incident report, which meant Zara would be met by police when the plane landed in Miami. "This is your final warning," Rebecca announced to the entire cabin. "Passenger in 1A, you are being charged with interfering with flight operations, failure to comply with crew instructions, and disorderly conduct. You will be arrested upon landing." Brad Morrison stood up and started a slow clap. Finally, some proper authority around here. Elena Rodriguez's live stream viewers were now approaching 75,000. The comments were a mix of outrage and support. This is America in 2024. Sue them all. Where are the good cops when you need them? Someone find out who her father is. This girl has more grace than I would. She had also been recording on her regular phone camera as backup, knowing that live streams could be interrupted. She'd captured everything: Rebecca's initial discrimination, the physical contact, the escalating threats, and Brad Morrison's racist commentary. James Park had connected to the plane's Wi-Fi and was live-tweeting the entire incident with legal commentary, witnessing clear civil rights violation on @Premium Sky 847. Flight attendant targeting black passenger despite valid ticket. This is textbook discrimination. Captain now supporting discriminatory crew member. Multiple witnesses documenting. This airline is facing massive legal liability. Passenger has remained calm and dignified throughout harassment. She's handled this better than most adults would. His tweets were being shared by civil rights lawyers across the country. Several offered to represent Zara pro bono. Others started researching Premium Sky's history of discrimination settlements. Maria Santos, the junior flight attendant, was having a crisis of conscience. She'd watched Rebecca Walsh bully passengers before, but never this blatantly. Her own family had emigrated from Mexico when she was 10, and she remembered the discrimination they'd faced. "Rebecca," she said quietly, "maybe we should call this off. She's just sitting there reading. She hasn't caused any problems." Rebecca turned on her with fury. "Maria, you're either with me or against me. If you can't support your senior crew member, maybe you need to find a different airline. But she has a valid ticket. She has a suspicious ticket. And suspicious behavior. And she's been disruptive since the moment she boarded." James Park heard this exchange and stood up again. "I'm sorry, but I have to object to that characterization. I've been observing this passenger for 30 minutes. She has not been disruptive in any way. She's been reading a medical textbook and speaking quietly on her phone. The only disruption has come from the harassment she's been subjected to." Brad Morrison pointed at James. "Are you her lawyer or something? I'm a concerned citizen and a practicing attorney who recognizes discrimination when I see it." "Oh, great. Another bleeding heart liberal making everything about race." Elena Rodriguez turned her camera toward Brad. "Sir, what did you just say?" Brad realized he was being filmed and tried to backtrack. "I didn't. That's not what I meant." But it was too late. Elena had caught his racist implication on camera, and her 75,000 viewers heard every word. The comments exploded. "Did he just say what I think he said?" Get this racist's name. Someone identify this man. He needs to be fired from whatever company he works for. James Park had pulled up LinkedIn on his phone and was discreetly researching Brad Morrison. What he found made his blood run cold. Brad Morrison, Managing Director at Apex Capital Management, currently under SEC investigation for securities fraud and embezzlement. This just gets better and better, James muttered to himself. Meanwhile, in Washington, Marcus Brooks was receiving real-time updates on the social media firestorm his daughter's situation had created. Sarah reported we're up to 100,000 viewers on the main live stream. #Zara Justice is the #3 trending topic in the United States. I'm seeing pickup from major news outlets. What kind of pickup? CNN is preparing a segment for their evening broadcast. The Washington Post is assigning a reporter. Fox News is calling it discrimination in the skies. This is going national. David Kim looked up from his legal research. Marcus, I've found something interesting about Premium Sky's insurance policies. They specifically exclude coverage for discrimination claims where the company had prior knowledge of an employee's problematic behavior, meaning if we can prove they knew about Rebecca Walsh's history, which we already have, they'll be personally liable for any judgment. No insurance coverage. It comes straight out of their corporate assets. Marcus smiled. How much are they worth? Total company valuation is about $15 billion, but they carry significant debt. A judgment of $500 to $750 million would force them into bankruptcy or require them to sell major assets. Perfect. What about their executive team? CEO Richard Hampton has been there for 8 years. He would have personally approved the decision to keep Rebecca Walsh despite the complaints. That makes him personally liable for punitive damages. Tony Russell's voice came through on the secure phone line. Mr. Brooks, we're 30 minutes out from Miami. I've coordinated with Airport Authority. We'll be parking at Terminal 3, Gate 47. That's directly across from Premium Sky's Gate 45, where Flight 847 is scheduled to arrive. Will there be visual contact, sir? When your daughter gets off that plane, she'll see a $85 million Gulfstream G700 with Brooks Aerospace painted on the side, parked 50 yards away. Everyone will see it. Media positioning CNN and local stations will be positioned to capture both planes in the same shot. The visual contrast should be impactful. Back on Flight 847, Captain Williams was beginning to have serious doubts about Rebecca Walsh's version of events. He'd been flying for 25 years and had dealt with genuinely disruptive passengers. What he was seeing here didn't match that pattern. The passenger in 1A was reading quietly, speaking occasionally into her phone, and showing no signs of agitation despite being publicly humiliated. The actual disruption was coming from other sources. Rebecca, he said privately, are you sure about this incident report? Absolutely, Captain. She's been non-compliant from the moment she boarded. What specific airline regulation has she violated? Rebecca faltered for a moment. She refused to move when instructed, but she was instructed to move from her assigned seat to a different seat. Why? Because I suspected her ticket was fraudulent. Based on what evidence? Look at her. Captain, does she look like she belongs in first class? Captain Williams stared at his head flight attendant. Rebecca, you can't remove a passenger from their assigned seat based on how they look. I can if I suspect fraud. Do you have any evidence of fraud? Has the credit card been declined? Is the name on the ticket different from her ID? Is there any actual irregularity? Rebecca realized she'd painted herself into a corner. I used my professional judgment. Your professional judgment was to discriminate against a passenger based on her race and age. That's not professional judgment, Rebecca. That's illegal. The conversation was overheard by several passengers, including Elena Rodriguez, who made sure her camera captured Captain Williams's growing realization that he'd been supporting discrimination. James Park stood up once more. "Captain, if I may, I've documented this entire interaction. This passenger has violated no regulations. She's been subjected to harassment, physical contact without consent, and discriminatory treatment. If this incident report goes forward, your airline is facing massive federal liability." Brad Morrison had heard enough. "This is ridiculous. I'm calling my assistant to file a complaint with Premium Sky Corporate. This flight has been completely unprofessional." He pulled out his phone and started dialing. What he didn't know was that his assistant had just received a very interesting phone call from the Securities and Exchange Commission. Federal agents were currently searching his office, and his assets were being frozen pending a criminal investigation. His call went straight to voicemail. Elena Rodriguez was now up to 125,000 viewers. Her phone was overheating from the constant streaming, but she kept recording. This was the most important thing she'd ever documented. For those just joining, she whispered to her camera, "We're on Premium Sky Flight 847, and we've been watching a young black woman with a valid first-class ticket get harassed, physically grabbed, and threatened with arrest for the crime of sitting in the seat she paid for. The flight attendant's name is Rebecca Walsh. The racist passenger supporting her is Brad Morrison, and this girl has handled it with more dignity and grace than I've ever seen." The comments were overwhelming. "Elena, you're a hero for recording this. Someone needs to identify these racists. This girl's father needs to sue them all. Why hasn't anyone helped her? She's so calm. I would have lost it by now." Meanwhile, Marcus Brooks was watching the live stream from his jet, now 20 minutes out from Miami. His daughter was handling the situation exactly as he'd taught her, with quiet dignity, documented evidence, and legal awareness. "Sarah," he called, "I want Premium Sky's board of directors contacted individually. Every single one. Tell them Marcus Brooks would like a word about their company's discrimination policies." "All 12 of them, sir." "All 12. And Sarah. Make sure they know that Brooks Aerospace is reconsidering all current contracts with Premium Sky. Let them do the math." David Kim was coordinating with federal prosecutors in Miami. "Marcus, the U.S. Attorney's Office, is very interested in this case. Apparently, Premium Sky has been on their radar for civil rights violations. Your daughter's incident could be the catalyst for a major federal investigation." "Good. What about the FAA? They're launching an immediate inquiry into Premium Sky's crew training and discrimination policies. If they find a pattern which they will, the airline could face federal sanctions, including suspension of operating certificates." Tony Russell's voice crackled through the comm system. "Mr. Brooks, we're beginning our approach to Miami International. Ground crews are standing by. Media is in position. Are you ready to make Premium Sky's day very expensive?" Marcus looked out the window at the Florida coastline passing below. "Tony, let's show them what real first-class service looks like." On Flight 847, Rebecca Walsh had made her final decision. She was calling Miami Airport security and having Zara Brooks arrested the moment the plane touched down. She didn't care about the cameras, the witnesses, or the growing social media storm. She'd been a flight attendant for 18 years. She knew how to handle difficult passengers, and she wasn't going to let some entitled teenager make her look weak in front of her crew and passengers. What she didn't know was that in 18 minutes her career, her pension, and her freedom were all going to disappear. Because the teenager she was harassing wasn't just anyone. She was Marcus Brooks's daughter, and Marcus Brooks was about to land in Miami with $85 million worth of private jet, a team of federal prosecutors, and a very simple message: nobody touches his family. The final countdown had begun. Elena Rodriguez's phone was on fire, literally overheating from the constant live stream, but metaphorically exploding with viewer engagement. The hashtag #ZaraJustice had been shared over 200,000 times in the past hour, and her viewer count had exceeded 150,000 people watching the discrimination unfold in real time. "This is Elena Rodriguez, still broadcasting live from Premium Sky Flight 847, she whispered into her phone camera. We're now about 30 minutes from landing in Miami, and the situation has only gotten worse. She panned her camera across the first-class cabin, showing Rebecca Walsh huddled with Captain Williams Brad Morrison, aggressively talking on his phone, and Zara Brooks sitting calmly in seat 1A, still reading her medical textbook, while occasionally speaking quietly with her father. For those just joining us, Elena continued her commentary. This young woman has been harassed for over an hour simply for existing in first class while black. She has a valid ticket. She's committed no violations, and she's handled this with more grace than I've seen from any adult in a crisis situation. The comments section was scrolling so fast it was impossible to read individual messages. Elena, thank you for documenting this. Someone get this girl's father's name. Premium. Sky is about to get destroyed. This is America in 2024. Disgusting. That girl is going to own this airline. But Elena wasn't the only one building evidence. James Park had been methodically documenting every interaction on his laptop, creating a minute-by-minute timeline with exact quotes and witness observations. 11:47 a.m. Flight attendant Rebecca Walsh approaches passenger Zara Brooks in seat 1A, claims she's in wrong section despite valid boarding pass. 11:52 a.m. Walsh physically removes passengers' headphones without consent, constituting assault under federal law. 11:58 a.m. Passenger Brad Morrison, 2A, makes racist comments about urban noise and charity cases. 12:03 p.m. Walsh threatens passenger with arrest for non-compliance despite passenger committing no violations. 12:07 p.m. Captain Williams called to scene initially supports discriminatory actions. 12 p.m. Walsh calls for airport security to arrest passenger upon landing. James had also been discreetly photographing Rebecca Walsh's employee badge, capturing her full name and employee ID number. As a corporate attorney who specialized in discrimination law, he knew this documentation would be crucial for any federal investigation. His Twitter thread about the incident had been retweeted over 15,000 times. Thread witnessing systematic discrimination on @Premium Sky Flight 847. Flight attendant Rebecca Walsh, ID number 47291, targeting black teenager with valid first-class ticket. This is textbook civil rights violation. 112. The responses from the legal community were immediate and supportive. James, this is slam-dunk federal case. That airline is in serious trouble. Document everything. This could set major precedent. Do we know who represents this passenger? Pro bono offers incoming. Meanwhile, Maria Santos was having the worst day of her 2-year flight attendant career. She'd gone into aviation to travel the world and help people not to watch her supervisor destroy a teenager's dignity on live stream. Rebecca. She approached her supervisor quietly. This is getting out of control. Maybe we should... Maria, for the last time, stay out of this. You're a junior employee, and you don't understand the complexities of managing first-class service. But the cameras... What cameras? Maria pointed discreetly toward Elena Rodriguez, who was obviously filming everything. Half the cabin is recording this. It's all over social media. For the first time, Rebecca Walsh looked genuinely concerned. She'd been so focused on exerting her authority that she hadn't considered the broader implications of her actions being broadcast live to hundreds of thousands of people. How many people are watching? Rebecca asked. I don't know, but the nurse in 3B said something about trending nationally. Rebecca's confidence wavered for a moment, but then her stubbornness reasserted itself. I don't care who's watching. I'm doing my job. If people don't like it, they can complain to corporate. What Rebecca didn't know was that corporate was currently in full panic mode. In the Premium Sky executive boardroom, CEO Richard Hampton had called an emergency meeting with his legal team, PR department, and crisis management consultants. The wall-mounted monitors showed the company's stock price in real-time decline, down 12% and falling. How bad is this? Hampton asked his general counsel. It's catastrophic, Richard. We have a documented pattern of discrimination complaints against Rebecca Walsh that we chose to ignore. Now she's discriminating against someone on live stream with legal witnesses, and the victim's father is apparently wealthy enough to threaten our entire business relationship. The PR director looked up from her laptop. It gets worse. The hashtag #HazaraJustice is trending #2 nationally behind only a major sports story. CNN is breaking into regular programming. We're the lead story on aviation blogs. And someone leaked Rebecca Walsh's complete complaint history to the media. Who leaked it? Unknown. But it's accurate. All 47 complaints, including the ones we paid settlements to keep quiet. Richard Hampton felt his career crashing around him. What's our legal exposure? Conservative estimate, $300 to $500 million if this goes to trial. But if the federal government gets involved, how much then? Potentially unlimited. Civil rights violations carry massive punitive damages, and we could lose our operating certificates. On Flight 847, the passenger dynamics had shifted dramatically. What started as isolated support for Zara had evolved into cabin-wide recognition that they were witnessing something historically significant. Robert and Margaret Thompson, the retired teachers in 5A and 5B, had finally found their courage. "Excuse me," Margaret said, standing up and addressing Rebecca Walsh directly. "I've been teaching for 43 years, and what you're doing to that young woman is wrong. She's done nothing but sit quietly and read her book." Robert nodded in agreement. "We've been watching this whole thing, and you should be ashamed of yourself." Rebecca was caught off guard by criticism from the elderly white couple. "Ma'am, please return to your seat. This doesn't concern you." "It concerns all of us," Margaret replied firmly. "We're all witnesses to discrimination." Jessica Walsh, the young mother in 3A, spoke up next. "My daughter asked me why you're being mean to that girl. What am I supposed to tell her?" Even some of the previously silent passengers began voicing support. "This is ridiculous. Leave the girl alone." She paid for her seat. The tide of public opinion in the cabin was turning decisively against Rebecca Walsh, but she was too deep into her power trip to recognize the danger. Elena Rodriguez captured all of these interactions, providing her massive audience with a complete picture of how discrimination affects not just the victim, but everyone forced to witness it. "What you're seeing here," Elena narrated to her camera, "is how racism requires complicity from bystanders to survive. When people start speaking up, the whole system breaks down." Her analysis was being quoted by civil rights activists across social media. The incident was becoming a case study in real-time resistance to discrimination. James Park had been doing additional research on his laptop and discovered something explosive. "Elena," he called out quietly, getting the nurse's attention. "I think you should know something about Brad Morrison." Elena discreetly moved her camera to capture James's whispered revelation. "He's under federal investigation for securities fraud. $50 million embezzlement case. He's not just a racist passenger, he's a criminal." The implications hit Elena immediately. Brad Morrison wasn't just supporting discrimination. He was doing it while under active federal investigation himself. The irony was staggering. She shared this information with her live stream audience. Plot twist, everyone. The racist passenger supporting the discrimination is apparently under federal investigation for financial crimes. "You can't make this stuff up." The comments exploded. "Of course he's a criminal. Birds of a feather. This keeps getting worse. Someone call the FBI." Meanwhile, Zara Brooks continued her quiet conversation with her father, completely unaware that her dignified response to discrimination was inspiring people across the country to speak out against injustice. "Dad, people are starting to support me," she said softly into her phone. "That's because you're showing them what courage looks like," Marcus replied. "Keep being yourself. Don't let their hatred change who you are." "Are you really coming to Miami?" "Princess, I'm landing in 15 minutes. And when you walk off that plane, you're going to see exactly how much your father loves you." In his private jet, Marcus was reviewing the final details of his response plan. Sarah Martinez had confirmed that all 12 members of Premium Sky's board of directors had been contacted and informed about Brooks Aerospace's concerns regarding their discrimination policies. David Kim had prepared federal complaints to be filed simultaneously in 3 jurisdictions: Miami, where the discrimination occurred, Detroit, where it began, and Washington, D.C., where the corporate decisions enabling it were made. Tony Russell had coordinated with Miami Airport Security FAA investigators and federal prosecutors to be standing by when Flight 847 landed. Sir Tony reported we're 5 minutes from landing. Media is in position. Premium Sky's stock is down 18% and falling. Their board is in emergency session. And the Department of Transportation has announced they're launching an investigation into airline discrimination practices. Marcus smiled grimly. Sometimes the only way to fix a broken system is to break it completely and rebuild it from scratch. Back on Flight 847, Captain Williams was having the worst day of his 25-year flying career. His head flight attendant had created a federal incident. His first-class cabin was in chaos, and he was beginning to realize that he'd made a serious error in supporting Rebecca Walsh's actions. "Rebecca," he said quietly, "I think we need to de-escalate this situation. Captain, I've already called for airport security. We have to follow through. But what if she really does belong in that seat? She doesn't belong anywhere near first class." Captain Williams looked at Zara Brooks, sitting quietly reading her medical textbook, speaking occasionally with her father, showing no signs of the agitation or disruption that would justify the extreme response Rebecca was demanding. "Rebecca, I want you to step back and let me handle this from here. Captain, you can't undermine my authority. Your authority is creating a federal lawsuit. Step back. Now." For the first time, Rebecca Walsh realized that she might have seriously overplayed her hand, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. "Fine," she said stubbornly. "But when airport security arrests her, don't blame me for the media circus." What Rebecca didn't understand was that she'd just created the biggest media circus in aviation history. And in exactly 12 minutes, when Flight 847 landed at Miami International Airport, she was going to discover that some passengers have fathers who own private jets. And sometimes those fathers use those jets to make very public statements about justice. The evidence was documented. The witnesses were committed. The legal case was airtight. All that remained was for Marcus Brooks to show the world what happens when someone tries to diminish his daughter's dignity. The final approach to Miami had begun. Flight 847 touched down at Miami International Airport at 1:47 p.m. Eastern Time. As the Boeing 787 taxied toward Gate 45 in Terminal 3, passengers pressed against the windows to see what was waiting for them. What they saw took their breath away. Parked directly across from their gate at Gate 47 was the most beautiful private jet most of them had ever seen. The Gulfstream G700 gleamed like a black diamond in the Florida sunshine, its massive engines and swept wings making every commercial aircraft in sight look ordinary by comparison. Painted in silver letters along the fuselage were the words, "Brooks Aerospace." Elena Rodriguez turned her camera toward the window, her live stream viewer count now approaching 200,000. "Oh my God," she whispered. "There's a massive private jet out there with Brooks Aerospace on the side. Do you think—" The comments section went insane. "That's her father's jet. Brooks Aerospace. That's a billionaire company. She's the daughter of a billionaire premium. Sky is so screwed plot twist of the century." James Park looked up from his laptop, his face pale. "I just researched Brooks Aerospace. It's one of the largest military contractors in the United States. The owner is Marcus Brooks, net worth estimated at $4.2 billion. The cabin erupted. Passengers who had been watching the drama unfold suddenly understood the magnitude of what Premium Sky had just done. They hadn't just discriminated against a black teenager. They'd discriminated against the daughter of one of the most powerful men in American business. Rebecca Walsh felt her knees go weak. She stared out the window at the $85 million aircraft, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Brad Morrison had gone completely silent, his racist bravado evaporating as he realized he'd spent the last 2 hours insulting the daughter of someone who could probably buy and sell his entire hedge fund. Captain Williams grabbed his radio and called the tower. "Ground control. This is Premium Sky 847. Can you confirm the registration on that Gulfstream at Gate 47 Premium Sky 847? That's a private aircraft tail number November 777 Brooks. Belongs to Brooks Aerospace Industries." Captain Williams closed his eyes and took a deep breath. His airline had just created an international incident. Zara Brooks calmly closed her medical textbook and put her phone away. Through the window, she could see her father's jet, and she could see her father himself descending the aircraft steps. Marcus Brooks wore a perfectly tailored Navy suit and carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who owned the world. "Dad's here," Zara said simply to anyone listening. Elena Rodriguez kept her camera rolling as the jet bridge connected to their aircraft. "This is incredible," she narrated to her massive audience. "The father of the discriminated passenger has just arrived in what appears to be one of the most expensive private jets in the world." Airport security was indeed waiting at the gate, but not for Zara Brooks. They were providing escort services for Marcus Brooks and his legal team. Rebecca Walsh made one last desperate attempt to maintain control. "I don't care who her father is," she announced to the cabin. "She still violated airline policy and she's still being arrested." That's when Marcus Brooks walked onto the aircraft. The first-class cabin fell completely silent as he stepped through the doorway. Marcus Brooks was not a physically imposing man, 5'10", maybe 170 pounds, but his presence filled the space like electricity. Everything about him radiated power, from his custom-made shoes to his platinum watch to the way airline personnel immediately stepped aside to let him pass. Airport officials followed behind him, the Miami Airport Authority director, 2 FAA investigators, and a federal prosecutor from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Marcus walked straight to seat 1A, where his daughter was sitting. "Hey, Princess," he said softly, his voice carrying just enough to be heard throughout the cabin. "Ready to go?" "Hey, Daddy," Zara replied, standing up to hug him. "Just finishing my reading." Rebecca Walsh stepped forward, her voice shaking but still defiant. "Sir, you can't be here. This passenger is under arrest." For Marcus turned slowly to face her, his eyes absolutely calm. "Ms. Walsh, is it?" "How do you know my name?" "I know everything about you, Rebecca. 47 passenger complaints in 5 years, all involving passengers who looked like my daughter. All covered up by your airline's management instead of addressing the problem." Rebecca's face went white. "Sir, I was just doing my job." "Your job," Marcus said quietly, "is to serve drinks and ensure safety, not to play judge and jury based on how passengers look." Captain Williams stepped forward. "Mr. Brooks." "I apologize for any misunderstanding." Marcus held up one hand. "Captain Williams, there's been no misunderstanding. There's been documented discrimination witnessed by dozens of passengers, broadcast live to hundreds of thousands of people, and captured on multiple cameras. Your head flight attendant told my daughter that people like her don't belong in first class. She physically grabbed my daughter's headphones. She threatened her with arrest. All for the crime of sitting in a seat she paid for while being black." The federal prosecutor stepped forward and introduced himself. "Mr. Brooks, I'm Assistant U.S. Attorney David Chen from the Southern District of Florida. We've been monitoring this situation. Ms. Walsh, you're being placed under federal investigation for civil rights violations." Rebecca Walsh's world collapsed in real time. "Federal investigation for what?" "For discriminating against passengers based on race, which is a violation of federal law. You also filed a false report claiming this passenger was disruptive, which constitutes filing a false police report." Brad Morrison tried to sneak past the growing crowd of officials, but James Park blocked his path. "Excuse me," James said loudly, but this passenger was also involved. Brad Morrison from Apex Capital Management. He made multiple racist statements supporting the discrimination. The federal prosecutor looked at Brad with interest. "Morrison, are you the same? Brad Morrison currently under SEC investigation for securities fraud?" Brad's face went gray. I want a lawyer." "You're going to need several lawyers," the prosecutor replied. "We'll be adding federal discrimination charges to your existing case." Elena Rodriguez was capturing everything on her live stream, providing real-time commentary to her 225,000 viewers. "This is unreal, everyone. Federal prosecutors are here. The discriminatory flight attendant is under investigation. The racist passenger is apparently a federal criminal. And this billionaire father just walked onto the plane like he owns the place." Marcus Brooks looked around the cabin at the passengers who had witnessed his daughter's treatment. His eyes found Elena Rodriguez first. "You're the nurse who documented everything he said. Thank you for standing up when others stayed silent." Elena nearly dropped her phone. I just did what was right. No, you did more than that. You risked your own comfort to defend someone else's dignity. That's courage." He turned to James Park next. "And you're the attorney who provided legal support. Just documenting the facts, sir. You documented justice being denied. That matters." Marcus then addressed the elderly couple Robert and Margaret Thompson. "You spoke up when it would have been easier to stay quiet. My daughter won't forget that." Margaret wiped away a tear. "That girl has more grace than I've seen in decades. You raised her right." "I raised her to know her worth," Marcus replied, "and to never let anyone convince her she's worth less than she is." Finally, Marcus looked at the passengers who had remained silent during the discrimination. "Some of you watched injustice happen and chose to do nothing," he said calmly. "That's your right. But it's also a choice you'll have to live with." The shame in the cabin was palpable. Rebecca Walsh made one final desperate attempt to justify her actions. "Mr. Brooks, I was protecting the integrity of first-class service. Your daughter didn't look like she belonged." "Stop." Marcus's voice cut through her excuse like a blade. "My daughter didn't look like she belonged. She's an 18-year-old medical student who's been working 16-hour shifts at a free clinic in Detroit, treating patients who can't afford health care anywhere else. She's studying to become a doctor so she can help people. She belongs anywhere she chooses to be." He paused, his voice becoming even quieter. "But you're right about one thing, Rebecca. She doesn't look like the kind of person who belongs in first class. She looks better. She looks like someone who earned her place through character instead of just buying it with money." The cabin was dead silent. Now Marcus continued, "Let me tell you what's going to happen. Ms. Walsh, you're fired. Not just from this flight, but from aviation forever. Your actions created a federal civil rights violation that will follow you for the rest of your life." Rebecca opened her mouth to protest, but Marcus wasn't finished. "Mr. Morrison, you'll be answering to federal prosecutors for both your financial crimes and your participation in this discrimination. I suspect you'll have plenty of time to think about your choices while you're in federal prison." Brad Morrison was led away by airport security, his racist arrogance replaced by the reality of his situation. Captain Williams Marcus continued, "You initially supported discrimination instead of investigating it. That shows poor judgment that I'll be discussing with your airline's board of directors." The captain nodded silently, knowing his career was effectively over. Marcus then addressed the media crews who had gathered outside the aircraft. "To the journalists waiting out there, this isn't just a story about one flight or one incident. This is a story about accountability. When people in positions of authority abuse that authority based on prejudice, there have to be consequences. Real consequences that change behavior." He looked at his daughter, who had been quietly observing everything with the same calm dignity she'd maintained throughout the entire ordeal. Princess? Are you ready to go home?" "Yes, Daddy." As they walked off the aircraft together, Elena Rodriguez provided final commentary to her massive audience. What we just witnessed was more than justice being served. We saw what happens when someone with power uses it to protect dignity instead of just accumulating more power. Marcus Brooks could have handled this quietly behind the scenes. Instead, he made it public because discrimination thrives in darkness and dies in sunlight. The father and daughter walked across the tarmac toward the Gulfstream G700, their silhouettes framed against the massive aircraft. At the steps of the jet, Marcus turned back toward Flight 847 and the cameras capturing everything. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence, his jet, and his daughter's dignity had said everything that needed to be said. Premium Sky Flight 847 had landed in Miami carrying 247 passengers, but only one of them had really mattered. And she was walking away with her head held high, her character intact, and her father's love surrounding her like armor. The countdown was over. Justice had arrived. The fallout began before Marcus Brooks's jet even left the tarmac. Rebecca Walsh was escorted from Flight 847 in handcuffs, her 18-year career ending in the most public and humiliating way possible. Airport security had to shield her from the media crews who were documenting every moment of her downfall. The woman who had spent the morning discriminating against a black teenager was now learning what it felt like to be treated like a criminal. No comment, she kept repeating as journalists shouted questions about her history of discrimination complaints. "I want a lawyer." By the time she reached the airport security office, Premium Sky's legal team was already there to inform her that her employment had been terminated effective immediately. Her badge credentials and company credit cards were confiscated. Her pension built over 18 years of service was voided due to the gross misconduct clause in her contract. Ms. Walsh, Premium Sky's attorney, said coldly, "The company will not be providing legal representation for federal civil rights violations. You're on your own." Rebecca Walsh, who had started her day feeling powerful and in control, was now facing federal charges, unemployment, and financial ruin. The discrimination she had inflicted on others was about to become the discrimination that destroyed her own life. Meanwhile, Brad Morrison's day was getting exponentially worse. As airport security escorted him off the aircraft, his phone rang with a call from his wife. Roger Evelyn Morrison's voice was shrill with panic. "Why are there FBI agents at the house? They're taking your computers. They say something about securities fraud and civil rights violations." "What did you do?" Brad tried to maintain his composure, but his voice cracked. "Evelyn, listen to me. Don't say anything to anyone. Call our lawyer." "I already called him. He said he can't represent you anymore. Something about conflicts of interest." "Roger, what's happening?" "I don't know." Brad lied, but he knew exactly what was happening. The SEC investigation he thought he'd been successfully hiding was now public knowledge. And worse, his racist behavior on Premium Sky Flight 847 had been broadcast live to hundreds of thousands of people. His phone buzzed with a text from his business partner. "You're out. Security's packing your office. Don't come back." Another text from his country club. "Your membership has been terminated." Another from his daughter's private school. "Please arrange alternative enrollment for Emma. We cannot associate with families involved in federal discrimination cases." Brad Morrison watched his entire life collapse in real time. The hedge fund he'd built, the social connections he'd cultivated, the reputation he'd spent decades creating, all destroyed because he couldn't keep his racist opinions to himself for a 2-hour flight. As he was led through the airport, passengers from other flights recognized him from the viral videos already circulating on social media. "That's the racist guy, he's trending on Twitter. Someone get his picture." Brad ducked his head, trying to avoid the cameras, but it was too late. His face was already associated with discrimination fraud and everything ugly about privilege without character. The corporate consequences for Premium Sky were even more devastating. In the airline's boardroom, CEO Richard Hampton was watching his company's stock price crater in real time, down 23% and falling. Billions of dollars in market value evaporating by the minute. "How bad is it?" Hampton asked his chief financial officer. "Catastrophic. We've lost $3.2 billion in market capitalization in the past 4 hours. Our credit rating is under review. 3 major institutional investors have announced they're dumping their positions." The general counsel looked up from her laptop. "It gets worse. Marcus Brooks has officially terminated the $400 million Brooks Aerospace contract. Boeing is reviewing our parts supply relationship. The FAA has announced a full investigation into our discrimination policies, and the Department of Transportation is considering sanctions." "What kind of sanctions?" "The kind that could suspend our operating certificate." Richard Hampton felt the walls closing in. "What about Rebecca Walsh's complaint history? How exposed are we?" "Completely exposed. 47 documented complaints over 5 years. We have internal memos acknowledging the pattern but choosing not to act. Any competent prosecutor can prove we knew she was discriminating and chose to enable it. The PR director was monitoring social media. #Zara Justice has been shared over 2 million times. Premium Sky is trending negatively worldwide. Celebrity endorsements are being canceled. Travel bloggers are calling for boycotts. This is the worst airline crisis since United's passenger removal incident, except worse because this involves federal civil rights violations." Hampton knew his career was over, but he had to try to save the company. "What are our options?" Limited, the legal counsel replied. "We can settle quickly for hundreds of millions and hope to minimize criminal prosecution, or we can fight it and risk losing everything. How much would a settlement cost? Marcus Brooks's legal team is demanding $750 million, plus federal oversight of all our hiring and training practices. That's just their opening position." Richard Hampton did the math. A $750 million settlement would bankrupt Premium Sky or force them to merge with a larger airline. Fighting the case would cost even more and carry the risk of criminal prosecution for executive leadership. "Draft a settlement offer," he said quietly, "and prepare my resignation letter." The regulatory consequences were swift and severe. The Federal Aviation Administration announced an immediate investigation into Premium Sky's crew training and discrimination policies. The Department of Transportation opened a formal civil rights inquiry. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission launched a pattern and practice investigation. But the most devastating consequence was the loss of public trust. Elena Rodriguez's live stream had been viewed over 2 million times. The hashtag #ZaraJustice was trending in 12 countries. News outlets around the world were covering the story as an example of how discrimination still thrived in American corporations. More importantly, other victims were speaking out. Premium Sky's customer service phones were flooded with calls from passengers sharing their own stories of discrimination. Flight attendants and gate agents who had witnessed bias but stayed silent were now coming forward. Former employees were talking to lawyers about their own experiences with the airline's discriminatory culture. What had started as one incident on one flight had become a reckoning with decades of institutional bias. The personal costs for Rebecca Walsh continued to mount. Within hours of her termination, her story had gone viral. Videos of her discriminating against Zara Brooks were shared millions of times, often with her full name and employee information clearly visible. Her apartment complex received so many angry calls that they asked her to break her lease and leave. Her local grocery store banned her after other customers recognized her and complained. Her own family members were distancing themselves from the controversy. Rebecca Walsh had become the face of aviation discrimination, and that face was now unemployable in any public-facing role. For Brad Morrison, the consequences were even more severe. The Securities and Exchange Commission expedited their investigation based on his public racist behavior, arguing that his character defects made him likely to engage in other forms of fraud. Federal prosecutors filed additional charges related to his discriminatory statements on the flight, arguing that his behavior showed a pattern of contempt for federal law. His bail was set at $10 million, which his frozen assets couldn't cover. Evelyn Morrison filed for divorce within 48 hours, citing irreconcilable differences and public embarrassment. His hedge fund collapsed as investors fled, taking $2 billion in assets with them. His professional license was suspended pending criminal proceedings. Brad Morrison, who had started the day as a wealthy hedge fund manager, ended it as an unemployed criminal defendant, facing 15 to 20 years in federal prison. But perhaps the most significant consequence was cultural. The incident had sparked a national conversation about dignity, respect, and accountability. Zara Justice became more than a hashtag. It became a movement demanding that people in positions of authority be held responsible for discriminatory behavior. Airlines across the country immediately updated their training programs and discrimination policies. Corporate boards began reviewing their own complaint procedures. The incident became a case study in business schools about the cost of ignoring bias in the workplace. Marcus Brooks had achieved something remarkable. He had turned his daughter's trauma into a teachable moment for an entire industry. As news of the settlements and prosecutions spread, other discrimination victims found the courage to speak out. Civil rights lawyers reported a surge in discrimination complaints across multiple industries. The message was clear. There were consequences for treating people as less than human. The Brooks family's response had shown that money could be used for justice instead of just accumulation. That power could protect dignity instead of just accumulating more power. And that sometimes the most important thing a father can do is show the world that his daughter's worth is not negotiable. The immediate consequences had been swift and severe, but the lasting changes would take years to fully understand. 1 year later, Zara Brooks walked across the stage at Harvard Medical School's freshman orientation ceremony. In the audience, Marcus Brooks watched his daughter receive recognition for her volunteer work at Detroit's free clinic, the same work that had exhausted her on that infamous flight. This year's Excellence in Community Service Award goes to Zara Brooks. The dean announced, who spent her gap year providing medical care to underserved communities while maintaining complete anonymity, working under an assumed name to ensure her focus remained on service rather than recognition. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew the story. The young woman who had been told she didn't belong in first class was now being celebrated at America's most prestigious medical school for her commitment to serving those whom society often overlooked. Marcus smiled as his daughter accepted the award with the same quiet dignity she'd shown on Premium Sky Flight 847. She'd learned that character was revealed not in moments of comfort, but in moments of challenge. And she'd passed that test beautifully. After the ceremony, they sat together in Harvard Yard, sharing coffee and reflecting on how much had changed. "Dad, do you ever regret how we handled it?" Zara asked. Marcus considered the question carefully. "Princess, we didn't create that situation. We just refused to let it end with you being diminished. Sometimes the only way to fix a broken system is to expose it so completely that it has to change. But Rebecca Walsh lost everything. Her career, her pension, her reputation. Rebecca Walsh chose to discriminate against you based on the color of your skin. Every consequence that followed was the result of her choice, not ours. We didn't destroy her life. She destroyed it herself the moment she decided that your dignity was negotiable." The changes across the airline industry had been comprehensive. Premium Sky had been acquired by a larger airline after paying $800 million in discrimination settlements. The merger agreement required federal oversight of all hiring, training, and customer service policies for 5 years. Elena Rodriguez, the nurse whose live stream had documented everything, was now Premium Sky's Director of Passenger Advocacy, a newly created position designed to ensure discriminatory treatment could never be buried again. Her job was to investigate every complaint and report directly to federal regulators, bypassing corporate management entirely. Elena called me last week, Zara mentioned. She said passenger complaints about discrimination have dropped by 90% across the industry. Not because discrimination stopped happening, but because people know there will be consequences now. Marcus nodded. Fear of accountability creates temporary change. Respect for human dignity creates lasting change. Most airlines are still in the fear stage, but that's a start. James Park, the attorney who had documented the discrimination, had used his experience to launch a non-profit organization providing free legal representation to discrimination victims. The James Park Center for Aviation Justice had already handled over 200 cases with a 95% success rate. I got a letter from a teenager in Phoenix last month, Zara continued. She was denied boarding because the gate agent said her ticket looked suspicious. But other passengers started recording and they used our case as precedent. The airline apologized immediately and upgraded her entire family to first class. That's the real victory, Marcus said. Not the money or the media attention, but the fact that other people now know they don't have to accept discrimination silently. The broader cultural impact had been even more significant. Zara Justice had evolved from a hashtag into a foundation dedicated to fighting discrimination in transportation, hospitality, and public accommodations. The foundation provided legal support, documented incidents, and worked with companies to implement bias-free policies. Rebecca Walsh's downfall had become a cautionary tale taught in customer service training across multiple industries. Her name was synonymous with how personal prejudices could destroy both victims and perpetrators when allowed to operate without accountability. She was currently working at a discount retail store in a small town in Ohio, having moved away from her former life in shame. Every potential employer in aviation had rejected her applications. Her federal conviction for civil rights violations followed her everywhere. Brad Morrison was serving a 12-year sentence in federal prison for securities fraud and civil rights violations. His hedge fund had collapsed completely, costing investors billions and destroying dozens of other careers. His wife had remarried and moved to another state. His children had changed their last name to avoid association with his crimes. "Do you think they learned anything?" Zara asked. Marcus considered this. "I think they learned that actions have consequences. Whether they learned anything deeper about human dignity and respect, that's between them and their consciences." The conversation turned to Zara's future plans. She was majoring in emergency medicine with a focus on healthcare equity. Her goal was to return to community clinics after graduation, using her medical training and family resources to improve care for underserved populations. "I want to work where I worked that summer," she said. "Detroit, Newark, South Central LA. Places where people judge you by how much you care, not how much you own." Marcus felt profound pride in his daughter's choices. The lesson he'd tried to teach by having her work anonymously had taken root in the best possible way. She understood that privilege came with responsibility and that true fulfillment came from service to others. "Princess, when I insisted you work under a fake name, I wanted you to see how the world treats people when they don't know your last name or your bank account. You learned that lesson, but you taught me something too. What's that? I learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do with power is use it publicly. Not for personal gain, but to protect people who can't protect themselves. Your dignity was worth defending not just because you're my daughter, but because you're a human being. And when we make that defense public, it protects other people's dignity too." As they walked back toward Marcus's car, a modest sedan rather than the limousine he could afford, Zara reflected on how the experience had shaped her understanding of justice. "The weird thing is, I'm grateful it happened," she said. "Not for the discrimination, but for learning that I could handle it. That I could keep my dignity even when people tried to take it away. That's a strength I'll carry forever." Marcus smiled. "That strength was always there, Princess. The situation just revealed it." They drove home in comfortable silence, both understanding that the incident on Premium Sky Flight 847 had been more than just a confrontation with prejudice. It had been a demonstration of how character responds to crisis, how love protects dignity, and how individual courage can create change that ripples far beyond the original moment. Zara Brooks would become Dr. Zara Brooks in 3 years. She would spend her career treating patients who looked like her in communities that needed advocates. She would use her family's resources to open free clinics and fund medical scholarships. And she would never forget the lesson she learned in Seat 1A, that dignity belongs to everyone regardless of how they look or where they come from. That prejudice dies in sunlight, and that sometimes the most important thing a father can do is show the world that his daughter's worth is non-negotiable. The Sterling Hawk still sat in the Brooks Aerospace hangar ready to fly whenever justice needed defending. Because some battles are worth having, some stands are worth taking, and some legacies are worth leaving. Thank you for following this powerful story about standing up for what's right, even when the world tries to tear you down. Zara's quiet strength and Marcus's unwavering support remind us that dignity isn't about how much money you have, it's about how you treat others, and how you refuse to let anyone make you feel less than you are. This story shows us that discrimination only survives when good people stay silent. Elena Rodriguez's decision to film James Park's legal documentation and the eventual support from other passengers proved that when we stand together, injustice cannot hide in the shadows. If this story moved you, please hit that like button to help spread awareness about the importance of treating everyone with respect. Share this video with friends and family who need to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories about courage, justice, and the power of standing up for what's right. Remember, you never know when you might be the only person willing to speak up for someone who needs an advocate. Be like Elena Rodriguez. Be like James Park. Be like the passengers who finally found their voice. Because sometimes one person's courage can change everything. Until next time, treat everyone you meet with the dignity they deserve. You never know whose daughter, son, mother, or father you might be talking to. And remember, character isn't about where you sit on the plane. It's about how you act when nobody's watching and how you stand up when everybody is. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.